So, welcome to a very exciting episode of the Good Listening to podcast with me, Chris Grimes. And it's good evening from the UK, but good morning, Australia, to somebody I'm delighted they said yes to speak to me. It's someone called Edward Zia, who is an international master coach and marketing mentor. And why I really wanted to talk to you, Edward, is my awareness of you as being nothing short of a LinkedIn phenomenon. Phenomenon. In that, I saw from your own posting recently, rather astonishingly, you've come very close to having, well, you had 78,000 LinkedIn connections, and then it's approaching 80,000 probably and counting very soon. So you are a sensation, kind sir. You really are.
Now, thank you. In fact, touch wood, I'm going to hit 80,000 followers in the next few hours, which I'm very excited about because I remember when I used to be like 100 followers. So it's good to go from 100 to 80,000. It feels good.
Yeah, but and how have you done that? And why was that it's such an impressive thing to achieve, but how did that journey start for you?
Yeah, no, great question. And there's a few different answers to that, but I'll give you this answer. It all started by connecting with people and building your base and nurturing relationships. And what really helped me take off quickly, what sort of helped me sort of go from, 10,000, 20,000 to 80,000 and followers and good was pretty much sharing really good content and also supporting my friends as well. So I support a lot of my friends' content, our clients' content, and they support your content. And that really, really helped me take off quickly in such a short space of time. So really thrilled with all that.
So there's sort of reciprocity involved. It's amplification, where you're resonating with people to amplify each other, is what you're saying.
Exactly. What a lot of people don't understand about LinkedIn, even some people with a lot of followers, mind you, and I can't stress this enough, is that LinkedIn is a two-way street. And if you look at the people that do really well, the influencers way bigger than me. They're all reciprocity driven. They know that LinkedIn's a two-way street. And what I mean by that is that they're interacting with people, they're supporting other people's content, they're talking to their clients and fans one-on-one, and they're the people that do really, really well on the platform. And and that's a big thing. And a lot of people don't know this as well, but with the LinkedIn algorithm, it's not just your posts and how many likes and views you get. It also measures how you engage with other people's posts. So algorithmically, you get rewarded for supporting other people as well.
And in the great sort of sea and deluge of your own contacts, what was really astonishing for me when I connected with you, probably about a year ago, you took it upon yourself to leave a personalised video almost immediately. And I thought, gosh, that's really unusual. And then tuning into how many followers you had, I thought, how do you possibly find the time to do that? Because it seemed like you must do that for everybody all the time, it would seem.
Yeah, well, the way it works is, so on LinkedIn, there's a difference between followers and connections, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a distinction there. So, for example, you can have millions of followers, which I could only dream of, and that would be awesome. And you can have, I think, up to 30,000 connections. So connections are actually quite finite on LinkedIn. And what's interesting is that when you really start to take off, you actually find this problem. This might sound weird to a lot of people, but people who are getting there or being there know what I'm talking about. But when you really take off on LinkedIn, and this is actually very important. Hey, bless you. It's actually raining here as well. So it's actually a bit rainy and cold in Sydney. So that must have caused you to sneeze in the UK. So there you go. I'm actually just going to some undercover over here. But one of the big things I want to really point out is that, you can hit 30,000 connections really quickly. Right. And once you've hit 30,000 connections, you're kind of done. And that's when you got to rely on your follower growth. And that's one of the big things. It's about connecting with the right people and building one-on-one relationships with people you're connected to, whilst creating really good content for the big followers at large.
And it's a great pleasure to have you here. If I may, I'm going to take you through the Good Listening to podcast structure, which is a series of storytelling metaphors that will really get to help you tell us more about, who Edward Zia is, what your story is, and not that you need any brand amplification at all from me, but it's just going to be really lovely to find out more about the man who started his career working for the Australian government. I remember reading about you where you were doing some engineering work, and then you've also done some pretty street stuff as well, preventing terrorism. So in your background, it's a really rich story, and I'm really interested in you telling it. So The Good Listening To podcast is going to invite you, first of all, into a clearing, Edward Zia. So where do you go in your obviously very busy and hectic week? Where do you go to get clutter-free, able to innovate and get some oxygen blowing between your brain cells?
Well, easiest way, I'm going to use yesterday as an example of how I did that, right? So yesterday I had a very long day. So for our friends around the world, I'm based in Sydney, Australia, which is like our biggest city. And Sydney, I always like saying, is like a cross between take, sort of Florida and New York and stick them together and fill it full of British and Australians and Americans and a lot of people from, Asia abroad, and you kind of got Sydney. And I went to our nation's capital yesterday called Canberra, like Washington, DC. Anyway, and it takes 3.5 hours. It's a 3.5 hour coach ride. The coach is the easiest way to get in there. And I went there and back. So I would have traveled at least 8 hours yesterday, 8 hours of traveling. And that's literally sitting on buses and trains and that. And that was actually a great chance to declutter because I had 3.5 hours, for example, to get from Sydney CBD to Canberra CBD. It actually gave me a chance to really declutter, to spend time on my phone, just catch up with my social media and just relax, just watch, junk on YouTube and chill out and entertain myself. And that's one of the biggest things that I've had to become pretty good at just to survive is you got to do the work, you got to deal with whatever you got to do, but also you got to switch off and enjoy yourself. And they're the ones that really get it. And that's one of the key things I've really learned, especially lately.
So travelling from A to B is how you then depressurize, but it sounds like you're very active in what you're doing. If you're looking at a lot of social media, watching YouTube, catching up, and if you've got as many people, I suppose, connecting to you, I'm wondering how relaxing it truly is to be constantly on your device.
Yeah, well, I suppose I wasn't constantly on it. I suppose that's my point. So in a 3.5 hour bus ride, I was on my device a little bit, but a lot of it I was just chilling, staring out of the window. And when I'm on my device, it's actually quite pleasant. So it's not like I'm on my device and it's a stressful, horrible experience. It's like, it's actually a positive, enjoyable experience. I'm actually enjoying it. And interestingly, there weren't that many people on the bus, mind you, yesterday being a Friday morning. And everyone's on their phones. And some people were working, some people were playing, and some people were doing a bit of both. So it's quite pleasant. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. So when I'm on my phone, it's actually not a grind. It's actually quite pleasant stuff that I do.
And so the clearing then is travelling. So it's the actual action of travelling from A to B. So obviously it was Sydney to Canberra yesterday. So the comic construct now is I'm going to take you, now we're in your clearing, I'm going to join you in your clearing with a tree now, which is going to be slightly comical. I'm getting onto a coach to Canberra with a tree.
So that tree right here. And
then we can shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out.
We can shake it. There we go. So we're going to.
You're actually going to do that.
So we're gonna. There we go.
You see, that's fantastic. You've messed with my head with scale now because I assumed that was a massive tree behind you, but it's a veritable sort of shrub stroke bush of a tree which you've shaken.
It is. It looks like a big red gum 100 meters away. It's actually a relatively small tree. There you go. So.
Or it's a huge tree, and you are a giant of a man, obviously. So I love the playing with scale there. So we're going to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out here in the clearing on the Good Listening To podcast. And the apples take the form of, and thank you for being willing to prepare about this before we spoke, you've had 5 minutes, and maybe you did this on the coach, maybe you didn't, to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to, squirrels, grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you, Edward Zia, that we couldn't possibly get to know about you until you tell us. So over to you. How do you like them apples? Shake the tree and just tell us what you like.
Sounds really good. Well, a place to start, a secret fact about me that a lot of people are starting to find out is I'm actually a knight. So I'm a Templar. I'm actually a knight. So I've actually been knighted. A lot of people don't actually know that, and that's coming to the surface. So my wife actually encouraged me yesterday to put that on my LinkedIn profile, which I did. So I've actually got knight in the description. So I'm actually a knight, believe it or not. So there you go.
Congratulations. And is that the sort of, it says on the LinkedIn headline, Christian Knight Templar. Are they all connected?
Well, they are. I got Templar in the feed, but I actually put the word, so I got Christian on my LinkedIn bio, right? But I actually put the word knight in there, as suggested by my wife. And I thought, what a great woman. What an amazing woman. Why didn't I think of this before? That's why I listened to her. And it's wonderful Lassie, by the way. And that's an example. A lot of people, so I'm actually a Knights Templar, and a lot of people don't know that. So it's a bit of trivia for everyone. And it's now starting to come to the surface and become well known.
And for those of us that don't know what a Knights Templar is, how do you become one? What is one? And what does it give you?
Well, you get invited into it is kind of the way it goes. And a lot of veterans, especially if you're a veteran and you're quite popular in the community, you got a bit of pull, be it, a Templar or a Freemason might tap you on the shoulder at some point, right? That's kind of
Yes.
the way it goes. And it's a lot of the Knights Templar, the Masonic orders, that sort of thing. What they actually kind of are is they're institutions that have been, some of them for over 1,000 years, have been around for a very, very long time. And what they basically are charity and political organizations, sort of combined together. So it's charity and politics, and you're doing that to help the world around you and help the community.
And was it Lassie's idea, your wife's idea, or was it somebody else that maybe you can't tell us who came and sort of tapped you on the shoulder on that fateful day?
Oh no, that was quite a long time ago. It was actually just when I met Lassie, actually, where I got knighted. So which is very cool. So that was actually it was actually one of my clients and friends from the business chamber that said, Ed, we need someone like you. You know what I mean? Because I've always been, for a while, I was always sort of the lone wolf Christian activist.
Yeah.
They said, Ed, do you want to come into our order and really help out? And okay, and I did, and that was amazing. It gave a bit of structure and platform to help my charitable contributions and that type of thing.
And so, what are your duties? Is it a fixed number of hours a month, or are you just now constantly on call as a Knights Templar?
Well, it's where I'm at with that Christian spiritual journey. What it more is that I'm more doing my own thing, so I opportunistically do it as I go along. So basically, I'm quite politically active in Australia. I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and during a given day, many opportunities will come up for me to actually, live that sort of Christian life and serve the world around me. That could be anything from, that could be anything from, talking to someone begging in the street or someone who's troubled and playing more the Christian minister. And that can be quite to the other extreme of, talking to business leaders and high political figures and influencing them on policy and direction.
And in your journey to now and the job that you do, if people don't have any reference to you and they sort of meet you and say, like, I could be on the coach sitting next to you on the way to Canberra, and if a stranger turns to you and go, oh, you look interesting, what do you do? What's your favourite way of answering that directly?
Well, that actually happened to me yesterday. So when I was coming back from Canberra, so I had my phone here, which I'm tethering off now. So I had my phone here, and what I was actually just posting stuff, and there was quite this attractive. I'm an old man, so I can say it was this young strapping lad sitting next to me, right? Young handsome strapping lad sitting next to me, and we just started talking. He goes, "Man, you are fast." Because in my world, everyone's got 100,000 plus followers, and everyone's on social media, and everyone's as fast as me. In my little world, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of, when I'm on my phone, someone actually videotaped me typing on my phone, and I didn't believe it was me. It's just literally, the fingers
You
go
thought they'd
faster
sped
than
it
what
up.
I see, right?
You thought they'd sped you up.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow. Anyway, this guy's like, wow, you're like really fast, and then he goes, I think I've seen you before on LinkedIn. It was quite funny, and then and we just started talking, sort of became pals, and anyway,
I bet he's one of your 80,000 connections now, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I think he actually is, right? Because
Yeah.
at the very least, he knew who I was, right?
Yes.
And what was interesting though is what I just simply said to the guy was, look, I'm a master coach, and I just help support people across the world, and that's actually pretty much as simple as that. The more I help people, is the more I get helped in return.
Okay. And so, in answering what you do, then what's the bish bash bot answer to that? So you're just somebody who wants to help people.
Yeah, well, in technical terms, you would call me an influencer coach. So I help people become influencers and help people become famous.
So what about four things that have inspired, four things that have shaped you? So this is where we can go back to how you got going towards the journey to now.
Yeah, well, definitely marrying the right woman, being Lassie. She's very much shaped me, because I always wanted to marry an amazing, strong woman that would help me go to the top. So that was something I was really looking for. So Lassie's been amazing in that one. So big shout out to Lassie. Secondly, what's really
how long ago? Sorry to interrupt you. How long ago did you meet Lassie, and how long have you been married for?
About 5-6 years ago. 6 years ago, and she's been absolutely wonderful. So married wonderful Lassie. Getting injured. So I got injured very bad. What ended my military policing career was getting injured very badly on an operation. that definitely shaped me. Well, it almost killed me, right? So, that was definitely whilst it was a dark experience, the outcome of that has been very positive. So definitely that experience.
I mean, do you want to tell us any more about that, about what happened? Because it was obviously a major sort of a moment in your life that you'll never forget that was very formative.
Yeah. So sort of just the way basically what happened was it was a drug sting. So I was working in drug enforcement, and basically drug stings. If you're ever going to get injured or killed working in drug enforcement, it will be during a sting. That's like the ultimate high risk area. And there was a battle. I got injured very badly in that, and I was out for a long time. I almost died, right? And I was unconscious for weeks, right?
And in the timeline of Edward Zia, how long ago, when was that period of your life? Are we talking 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
20 plus years ago. 20 plus years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, about probably 21, so 42. No, about 21, 22 years ago. It was a long time ago. I think it was 21 when it happened about then. 21. It's a long time ago. Very long time
I was going
ago.
to ask you if you didn't mind how old you were. So you're positioning
42.
yourself as being in your 40s now, I'm assuming.
42. I'm 42.
Because the idea behind the construct is round about once every 10 years, something pretty seminal happens to us, which is how we can then adhere to, that's what shaped us. So that shaped you. What else might have shaped you?
Yeah, I tragically spent a bit of time homeless in the foster system when I was growing up. So that definitely shaped me in a very darkened sort of way. Because basically when you're going from, if you're like the foster kid without parents, you're prey for the school bully, because school bullies are love them or hate them, they're quite smart. Foster kids are ones they usually target, even today, because they know you've got no backup, right? So so for example, by probably about year 11 or 12, I just had so much fighting experience under my belt. I could take down people way bigger than me, right?
So it gave you the survivor's instinct.
Yeah, and just through fighting experience. Like when I started fighting, I used to get beaten up all the time. But after losing the 10th time, you learn how to fight, and then it will be the other way around. I'd always be the one pulverizing people, right?
The pulverizer, I like that.
Yeah. And people like me because if someone, I became a bit of an enforcer. So if someone had trouble with a bully, I'm the guy that would sort it out, right? So
there's a lovely strand of fearlessness and bravery coming through here, because obviously to have the adrenaline, ability to ride the adrenaline, to get involved in drug enforcement, to survive a foster childhood, there's a lot of bravery and survival instinct here.
Well, I suppose bravery is an interesting one, because it's sort of like, I never ever set up to be brave. It's not like I'm Edward Zia I want to be brave today. It's kind of how people judge you. It's sort of, and I say this with shame, and I've had many instances in my life where I've chickened out. Right, I've had many times in my life where I've chickened out, and I feel shame and regret for that. And I've had times in my life where I've clearly stepped up and done the right thing. And and I think that's very, very. It's sort of like we're all going to have moments where you're going to look back in your life and say, damn it, I should have interfered. I should have done something.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have those moments where you did interfere and you did the right thing protecting someone. And, and I say that to anyone watching, if you see a big injustice underway, I'm not saying, just a quick caveat, I'm not saying put yourself in harm's way or risk yourself physically. You might have to call the police in that way. But if you see a great act of injustice going on, do something to help. Okay. Again, don't put yourself in harm's way. Don't get injured, but do something to intervene with that process. It could be as simple as, hiding behind a wall and, calling emergency services. And that might be all you can do. And that's just a simple yet great act of justice there.
And it sounds like you definitely stepped into the fray to be the enforcer, as you described, when someone needed, the injustice to be addressed in your childhood experience.
Yeah. So, and for example, I know a lot of our fans, especially female fans, would appreciate this. So where we live in a place called Western Sydney, right? And Western Sydney, I think, is comparable. I could be wrong here, but I think it's comparable to the East End of London. It's an area that was once not very pleasant that has become pleasant. So it's gentrification.
Right? Yeah.
And as you know, with gentrified suburbs, you can live in a suburb that is awful and everyone thinks it's terrible. And 5 years later, the houses are worth $1 million, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of an area like that. When we arrived here, it was a very rough part of town. Now it's getting really expensive. That's gentrified area. I think East London is like that. Is that a fair comment about East London?
Yes, Shoreditch, East London, areas like that, absolutely, the gentrification. And I live in Bristol, by the way, which is 100 miles west of London. And I'm in an area called Southville, which has experienced close to an area called Bedminster, something that's certainly gentrifying as we speak.
Yeah. And so when we moved into our block of apartments, it's all great now. It's all full of wonderful people, but there are a few wife bashers there, right? A few wife bashers, right? And I remember this is actually, one of our neighbours, right? We ended up getting him kicked out, but what happened was you could actually hear him throwing his wife against the wall. It was that bad, right?
Wow. Yes.
Oh, it's appalling. And so what we did was, in that scenario, call the police right away and just knocked on the door to distract him. And then amazingly, it was like within 8 minutes, there were, because this guy had a record of this, and within 8 minutes, there were like 2 cop cars and about 8 people up the stairs, right? It was incredible. And it was sort of like, that was quite an extreme situation, when you can hear a woman
a community,
the wall.
A community conscience stepped in.
Yeah, and the thing is, what was interesting is that when we sort of got control, anyway, we got this guy, he got it all sorted out. It was a long story, which I'm condensing for the sake of the interview. But the point being is that I could have ignored it. Could have just sat there and said, well, it's their problem. I could have said something like that, but I didn't. So you need to really interfere. And when there's again, don't put yourself in harm's way, but when there's an act of injustice, you need to really intervene and do what you can there.
And the sort of tenacity and energy and the sort of trailblazing that you now find yourself in a position of, it's to do with the energy that's informing you moving forward, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, and that all comes from, Jesus and God. That's where all my energy comes from. So a lot of people said, why are you so energetic? I'm not energetic. It's the energy that God and the universe gives me.
And energy is the currency of all connection. And as I've said, in my experience of you, your energy is awe-inspiring. It's very, very impressive.
Thank you. It does run out at times, and at times when no one's watching, I will eat a lot of sugar and cookies when no one's watching. But I do what I can to stay healthy and sane, depending on what it is.
Anything else you want to say about what shaped you, or shall we move on to the things that inspire you?
I think definitely move on, because I could go on about policing and law enforcement for a long time, and that would derail your great interview. So please move on.
So 3 things that inspire you.
So I mean, definitely Jesus and God. That's very important. So I pray quite often. So definitely Jesus and God. Definitely Lassie. Big shout to Lassie. Lassie certainly inspires me and gives me a lot of strength. And shout to Lassie. And probably the third thing is actually all my fans and friends across the world. Like when I open LinkedIn, LinkedIn makes me feel good. It's, LinkedIn for me is just such a positive experience. So, for example, that app going around called Clubhouse, right?
Yes.
Everyone's inviting me in a Clubhouse, and I've just said no because I'm loving LinkedIn too much. It's like, I don't want to go to Clubhouse. I just love LinkedIn. Leave me alone.
I'm feeling the same way currently, because it's yet another platform where you think, really? I mean, we could be missing a boat. Who knows? And we'll find out, I'm sure.
Well, the thing is, I'm totally happy to miss that boat because I love the one that I'm on. So, you can have that boat. I'm cool with my boat. Thank you.
That's a very nice philosophy.
Yeah.
So any third thing that inspires you before we move on to 2 things that never fail to grab your attention?
Gotcha. And I think as well, the other thing that inspires me is definitely having the right people in my life. So my fans across the world, as in people who I don't really know that well, but I feel that connection with, but also having the right people in my life. I've done a very strong job of ferreting out the bad people in my life. So I'm surrounded by wonderful people in my life, which that makes life easy on many levels.
And with the volume, coming back to the sort of 80,000 deadline that you're about to cross, do you feel that sort of a tidal, it's sort of, as the tide rises, all the boats rise with it. So you feel that it keeps you buoyant because you've got a very big groundswell of a fan base, I suppose, or a follower.
Yeah, and I love how you framed that, because it does rise the whole tide. Pardon me, it just started drizzling. So I'm just going to cover so my phone doesn't blow.
Your connection's great.
My PC.
You're perambulating around Australia for me. Thank you.
I know. On that note, when I do interviews, I try to do them as outside as much as possible. It's just more interesting when you do them outside.
I completely
But
agree. There is a lovely quote by Nietzsche, by the way: "The best ideas happen outdoors," and that.
really, but I found a bit of reasonable cover, so hopefully that'll cover me for a while. So
And
I
is this
didn't
all
think it would
your
rain.
property you're taking us round?
No, no, which is, so I actually live next door to, so where I'm actually at right now, I'm just sitting down here with a bit of cover. I actually live next door to one of Australia's most famous hospitals and research centres.
Ah,
Yeah, and they've got huge areas where people just hang out and work and that sort of thing. So it's really good. So I'm very lucky to live in this good spot. But yeah, I was going to say before I almost destroyed my PC.
we were talking about
But
other.
also
We're
having the
getting
right
on.
people in my life.
Yes, lovely. That's the third thing to inspire you. And so, two things that never fail to grab your attention.
Never fail to grab my attention. Politics, so I'm very tuned into politics. Especially, again, I don't want to get too political here, but especially what's happening in America. So in America, you've got basically two governments in now fighting each other. So that always has me on edge. And also local Australian politics I'm right into as well. And the other thing that also grabs me is probably injustice. Whenever I see big injustices, that always gets my attention. And whenever there's a big injustice, I usually put my nose in there and intervene. So that's part of the Templar Creed as well. So whenever I see an injustice, I naturally get drawn to it.
And by the way, that's a really clear golden thread, if you like, in the narrative of your journey because of the the foster stuff, the injustice stuff, the neighbour story you told us. It's really clear that you're willing to stand up to injustice, which is really commendable, and stop the bullies of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I derive a lot of pleasure out of that, which is good. So yeah, but also not just about me, but it's in terms of rising the tide. It's also helping other people too, because when you behave with strength, and it encourages other people to do the same, and also to the way it works in terms of more detail, in terms of a following point of view, the more followers I get helps my friends and clients get more followers, because at the end of the day, if you've got 5,000 followers and you like sharing comment on someone's post, it's not going to get that many views. If you've got 80,000 plus and you like sharing comment on someone's post, that could be an extra 500 views you've just granted to that person.
Which is why I suppose you're positioning yourself as being a master persuader and master influencer in the job that you do through your own company, which is excellence above, isn't it? .com.au.
Yeah. Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've already told us the quirky or unusual fact about you in that you are now a knighted Knights Templar. But is there another quirky or unusual fact you'd like to share with us?
I really like video games.
Okay.
And I'm extremely, my fault, by the way, this is my fault, by the way. I'm extremely frustrated right now that my business is not as automated as I like. Getting there, but my business isn't as automated as I like. So I want more time to play video games, but my business isn't quite automated enough there just yet. But hopefully another few months and I'll be there the way I'm going.
So that's where you're plotting coordinates towards your future.
Exactly. And so far, so good. But my goal is to actually have more time to do what I want to do and play some more video games. But that's not going to happen. Hopefully in about 3-6 months, that'll be actually commercially viable. But till then, no deal. So, and by the way, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing a lot of stuff right now. What I'm doing is setting up. So globally, I've got a lot of great clients and friends, which is awesome. But a lot of my time right now is actually setting up our local face-to-face network. Just so you know, in Australia, credit to our governments, we've been pretty light on when it comes to COVID, very light on. So for a lot of Australia, it's just back to normal living. Yeah, you got a few restrictions. You might have to wear a mask on a bus or something, but we're pretty much back to normal living these days. So getting our face-to-face events and
as you're ahead of us on the curve of that, what's new normal like for you? Has it become a hybrid working environment, or is it one that's just almost reverted like an elastic band, twanging back to normal?
No, it's a great question. It's a complete hybrid environment. So I'll give you an example. And I'll use yesterday as an example because it illustrates it so well, right? So for example, pre-virus, there used to be buses between Sydney and Canberra on the hour, every hour from like 4 a.m. to midnight, right? It's now 9 to 6. So there's less buses. There's less people traveling in between the city. And what's also interesting about that, there's less people on the bus, right? So what it is, and the reason is, it's not that these people are dead. It's the hybrid working environment, because what it is, and this is the permanent change. And I actually, whilst I'm not into lockdown, I don't support destroying small businesses and people's lives, and want to be clear on that one. I don't support this political use of lockdown as a weapon, right? Which it has been used, right? Lockdown has been used as a political weapon, which is tragic, because I'm about health, not politics. But I think the hybrid working environment's a good thing, because why should you make someone travel into work and use all these carbon materials and resources where you can do it online? So I think this hybrid is a good thing, and that I'm glad that's stuck around.
And indeed, that's the best of it that I'm looking forward to, the hybrid idea, because I recently was running a course where 14 people all dialed in from Dubai, but this time a year and a half ago I would have flown to Dubai to deliver a seminar, and it just makes complete sense that I wouldn't now. It makes much more sense from a carbon footprint to be able to do it from, even the idea of the podcast has come about because of lockdown, and because of this is just a great way to communicate, actually. I mean, even what we're doing now is very exciting. We're so far apart geographically, and yet, wow, look at us. We're connecting.
Yeah. I agree with that. My addition to that would be, though, is face-to-face is also critical, because one bit of feedback, I get this daily, by the way, I get this feedback daily, is that, look, I'm all for Zoom. I think webinar, I use Zoom and webinars all the time, and I think it's great that we can connect. However, on a mental health local level, and I hear this every day, is that people need face-to-face connection. You just can't lock someone in their apartment, right, and only let them out for groceries. And, you still need that face-to-face connection and interaction with people, because we're not designed to be in prison in our homes and just chat on Zoom all day. We're not built for, we never were built for that.
We are
right?
social animals, absolutely.
Yeah, and you need that face-to-face contact. I've heard so much of this from so many amazing people saying, Ed, we need this face-to-face contact. We need the social contact. And we take the precautions. We work with like top venues such as ACRE or Novotel, and we follow all the government and ACRE policies for maximum safety. And people say to me all the time, Ed, I need this face-to-face. I've had people, again, I'm protecting details here, say to me, saying, Ed, I considered ending my life during the lockdown, because things weren't going that well for me anyway, and lockdown just pushed me over the edge. And that's why I'm not a lockdown fan. I'm all for curing the virus and all. But the viewpoint that I've been in, and this has been quite common, is unfortunately lockdown has, in a lot of scenarios, has evolved from a health management tool to a political weapon. And that's the problem I've got with the way lockdown's being used. It's being used politically. It's not being used to actually help people.
Yeah, and the long tail of anxiety and societal depression is going to be a long tail indeed, very probably. The darker side of what it's done for people.
And what's interesting, a lot of governments aren't reporting on that. So what's interesting is that they'll report on COVID cases, but they won't report on actual mental illness and suicide. Yeah. And I think I know why, because, you'll do some calculations and go, hang on, you might be saving over here, but you're losing more over here. And that's and I think, our government's pretty good, by the way. I'm not having a shot at our government. Our government's very good. But I think for other governments around the world, that lack of transparency is a dangerous thing, because it feeds conspiracy theories. And whenever a government starts acting shadowy, rightfully so, it feeds critique, it feeds conspiracy theories, and it creates resistance. So I think not using lockdown as a political weapon and more transparency is very important.
Mm. Nicely put. So, so are you back to big scale networking events without social distancing now? So, because I know that you and Lassie run huge networking events when you can, don't you? So,
well, huge. There is probably, it depends what huge is. A lot of our events are like 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 people, right?
Okay.
So it depends what you mean by huge. So they're not huge at all.
I'll tell you what it is. It's a perception based on the economy of scale of looking at the events and photo montages you project on LinkedIn, which is a really good thing, because it looks like an incredibly vibrant sort of stadium of connection, if you like.
I suppose on that note, are our events huge? No. I mean, they're 10, 20, 30, 40 people. You would not say that's huge. But with the frequency of them is what makes them huge, right? Because we run so many, that frequency makes them huge. And in terms of, it depends, you have different regulations at different times. So what we do is we do encourage social distancing. And actually at our events, we discourage, handshakes and hugging. So we actually, the way it works in Australia is culturally, we do all of the fist bumps or the elbow bumps. That's what we tend to do. So for example, at our event in Canberra, that's the way we sort of handled it. It's very much fist bumps are very Australian. That's kind of what we're doing right now.
Oh, so was that the conduit that
And what
took
a lot
you
of
to
people
Canberra? Was
do.
that what you were
Yeah,
going for? Were you going to do a conference yesterday? Is that why you went there?
Yeah, well, actually in Canberra yesterday, that's one of the reasons why I'm quite happy is we ran our first event in Canberra, right? And it was a wild card. It could have gone either way, right? No one knows what's going to happen. And yeah, it was successful. And I'm very relieved because it's something that we've been plotting for a while. And the fact that we pulled off is we've now got a holding in Canberra, which is very important for our agenda.
Congratulations.
So it's really, really good. And that's for us. It's quite tactically important because it's like a government, political, military place. So there's a lot of tactical reasons why we're there. And what's interesting is, in terms of, we do encourage the social distancing, but in Australia, the elbow bump or the fist bump is very common in how people engage in the new world.
Lovely. So we're going to stay within the clearing now. We've shaken your tree. That's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now we're staying in the clearing, moving away from the tree, and we're going to talk about alchemy and gold, which you're giving me in spades anyway. So what is it's sometimes also, I heard it beautifully phrased recently as being the diamonds beneath our feet. So what is the alchemy and the gold that Edward Zia likes to bring to the world? How would you like to answer that?
Well, I actually asked people that. I did a research recently, and it's like, and a lot of people say inspiration. So whilst I share good ideas when it comes to becoming influenced, becoming famous, and they are great proven ideas, what actually brings a lot of people to us is the inspiration. I hear this word over again. Ed, you're just so positive, so inspirational. Watching your content makes me feel good. Okay, so I think that's the key thing, is the inspiration brought. And I've heard that over and over again. And then on a second level, we'll say, by the way, Ed, we like your ideas too. Your ideas are very successful. But number one, we love your inspiration. And okay, and that's what people are telling me. Great.
I love that. It's really clear and succinct that your alchemy and your gold is inspiration, and the quality you're projecting is optimism, positivity, warmth, and really underpinned by the elixir of all connection, which, as you've said, is your energy, which comes from your religious background and belief as well.
Yeah, and there's also a strong sense of justice about it as well. So one thing that we've so when our clients or community members, when they get bullied and they get harassed, we're the ones to hold their hands and help them push back. Okay, so I had a funny one. You'll appreciate this, Chris, and a lot of the fans did it. I ran you and I wouldn't think it's controversial, but other people do. I ran a webinar on how to deal with toxic people a week ago, right? And a lot of people loved it, and a few people got really angry with it, right? I even had someone on the webinar who started attacking me and left the webinar and started abusing me online, right? Ooh. Yeah, and what was interesting, because I was talking in the webinar, I was doing a bit of rant saying how toxic people are often bullies and the worst people ever. You don't want to be connected to them. And obviously, I struck a bit close to home on this person, right? And yeah, and it was funny, actually. It was funny. I did a webinar on toxic people, like how to handle toxic people. And that was requested. A lot of people have been asking me to do this. And the toxic people didn't like that. Ooh, no, they didn't like that.
You called it out.
That pissed them off. And that's a point. Like, it's classic projection. You would know this. You're a smart guy, Chris. It's classic projection. If you're, it's like those people who cheat on their husbands or wives, right? If you just bring up the topic of cheating in just normal conversation, they're the ones who get nervous very quickly,
or angry very quickly. And there is that lovely quote, isn't there? Your criticism of me is a reflection of you. So I love that fact that in the darker side of reciprocity, what you give out, you will get back, in the psychology of influencing, which you know all about, obviously, too.
I try to.
So we're at the point now where I'm going to award you with a cake, Edward Zia, where this is the last of the storytelling metaphors, where you're going to now put a cherry on the cake, which is the legacy of our conversation together. And you can go where you want to with this, but it's things like your favourite inspirational quote that's always given you succor and pulled you towards your future, and it could be advice you might give to your younger self. And if you want to, we can even get, I'm sorry, this is a deliberate multiple question because it's open to interpretation, but inspired by Shakespeare's all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, and each man in his parts plays many, parts, his acts being 7 ages. How would you, Edward Zia, most like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
Well, I think I actually was thinking about this the other day. My thinking would be, for my legacy, is I want to be remembered as a person who changed a lot of lives and cleaned things up. That's the way I want to be remembered.
Boom! I'm just letting that hang there. Clean things up was lovely. Called out the injustice and clean things up and help people.
When I say clean things up, I don't necessarily me clean things up, albeit I do, but I empower people to clean things up, and achieve what they want.
And I love the lovely birdscape soundscape you're giving me now. You beautifully positioned some wildfowl in your trees behind you.
Thank you. There we go.
So anything else you'd like to say before I find out where else we can find out about you, if we didn't already know, care of Edward Zia and LinkedIn and beyond?
No, I just want to say big thank you. I just want to say, Chris Grimes, you are a great interviewer. And for those of our fans watching, make sure you follow Chris Grimes too. So shout out back to you, Chris.
That's very kind of you, and I absolutely was not fishing for that, and that's very, very generous of you, Edward Zia. So, Edward, thank you so much for joining me, Chris Grimes, on the Good Listening To podcast. You have been listening to Edward Zia. Where can we find out all about you? So this is your chance to talk about excellenceabove.com.au and beyond.
The best thing to do is please, follow and connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just say that you listen to the Chris Grimes podcast. So I can locate you, and also just Google my name, Edward Zia, and you'll see heaps of stuff online, interviews, websites, stuff like that.
You are indeed very memorable, and thank you again so much for your immediate yes and, which relates so well to my comedy improvisation experience, by the way. Just say yes more to stuff in life, and windows of opportunity will open for us all. And you said yes immediately, and I had no idea whether you might have a team wrapped around you for me to be able to get to you to say hello to.
That's fine. Just go, well, you're either going to do it or you're not, aren't you? So there you go.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and have a wonderful day. What's your plans for the rest of your weekend in Sydney?
It's right now at 7:43 a.m. and my wife and kids are probably going to be waking up soon. So I'm going to go make them some breakfast right now. So definitely going to go crack some eggs and raise some hell in the kitchen.
I love that. Earning some great, awesome husband and father points there as well. So very best of everything to you, Edward Zia, and I will see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It's an honourable pleasure.
And good night.